Okay, so movie of the day, House by the Cemetery. Have I done House by the Cemetery already? I don't know. I don't think I have, actually. This movie does a number on your head, actually. I just finished rewatching it on TCM, TCM Underground. It plays pretty frequently on El Rey, and it's getting a little more higher profile here. Fulci movies are weird because unlike other filmmakers where they leave you the breadcrumbs and the more you watch the movies, things kind of coalesce and you see little moments and characters and plot lines, and it makes more sense and it kind of enriches the experience. I find with Lucio Fulci movies the exact opposite effect. That the more I watch them, the more the plots unravel and the less sense it makes. Every time I watch The Beyond, it makes less and less and less. I realize, like, this plot really doesn't make sense. This is kind of an incoherent dream narrative where things are just kind of coming together out of nowhere. He'll just introduce these ideas and they just kind of flutter off like butterflies, like cinematic butterflies. It's very it could make for a very frustrating experience. And I think if you're someone who's keyed into this stuff, that can't get into what Fulci is doing, because I think Fulci is an incredible visual stylist. He's making films that I think are arguably beautiful as any Mario Bava film. It reaches the heights of Mario Bava and those, those great Italian horror filmmakers of yore, like Riccardo Freda and Mario Bava and all that stuff. His stuff is on a technical level. Those are some beautiful looking films, especially when you watch them on, high definition television or Blu-ray or DVD, or a really nice, high definition sourced version. You just look at the beauty of the image. But the more you watch it, I love House by the Cemetery. It has to be one of my favorite Fulci movies. I've seen it so many times on DVD and Blu-ray and so forth, and I've loved it. I've loved it for a long time. I mean, I even love the title sequence. I mean, I kind of based the title sequence of my first film, Frankenstein's Bloody Nightmare, I used the same font. I didn't use the John Carpenter font. I used the House by the Cemetery font, the Euro style. I remember wanting to have the title sequence look like House by the Cemetery, and then the first scene in House by the Cemetery, I kind of was inspired to do the first scene in my film, my new film Forest of the Vampires. Kind of like, and even now rewatching, it's like the girl at the beginning of my scene even sounds like whoever dubbed Daniela Doria. I think that's her name, Daniela Doria. She is the first victim in House by the Cemetery. The first is going, Steve, are you dressed? By the way, this video is going to include a number of spoilers here. So, House by the Cemetery. What is it about? In New England, in a rural New England town, there is a haunted house where decades ago, hundreds of years ago, this crazy surgeon, Dr. Freudstein, did experimentation and was able to extend his life through the consumption of human cells. So he is a Dr. Butcher, MD, and and years later, he seems to be still hanging around his house. He's a bit of a homebody. And this new family, a man, Paolo Malco, a woman, Catriona McCall, and a little boy, Gianni Frezza, I believe his name, Frezza, come into the house. They are actually picking up for Paolo Malco's colleague, who apparently was living in this house doing research, doing some kind of historical research, but then hung himself and killed his mistress. Well, apparently he did, but we know it's kind of all roads lead back to Freudstein. So the new family is in this house, and so there is this monster story, but then there is the ghost story. There is a story of this young ghost girl who kind of inhabits this other dimension and is only seen by Bob. And she communicates to Bob, keeps telling him, Bob, don't go in the house. I love, she's dubbed by, like, it seems like this 60-year-old, like, German lady, because she talks and you can't understand what she's saying. And there's one scene where she goes, Bob, don't go in the house. She says, Bob, don't go in the house. And it's like she manages to put that in like 2 syllables. Bob, don't go in the house. I love it, Much sport on the internet and off has been made of Bob and the fact that he's a little kid, but he's annoying, he's weird, he's badly dubbed. I don't care about that, and if you care about that, go F yourself, really. I mean, I don't have a problem with the dubbing. I really have more problem with the dubbing in Don't Torture a Duckling than I do in House by the Cemetery. It doesn't really annoy me, though it kind of does a little bit rankle me in Don't Torture a Duckling. I would almost like an opportunity to watch Don't Torture a Duckling in Italian, which I never have. But anyway, getting back to House by the Cemetery, everyone in the town seems to think that Paolo Malco, the father, has been there before, but he hasn't been. But he doesn't think he doesn't seem to indicate that he's been there before. There's, like all Fulci movies, there's these plot strands of he's taken there's a picture in his house of the house by the cemetery. But so, has he been there before? Has he not been there before? Why is there a picture of the house by the cemetery in his house in New York? And Catriona McCall is like, "Hey, look at this house. We're here in the house by the cemetery. Isn't this exactly the house that you took a picture? That is a pic that's hanging in our New York apartment?" And he's like, "Well, no. There's a lot of houses in New England. I just like to like why? Like what? And then there's all the meaningful eye scenes with Anya Peroni, where there's a meaningful, like the Sergio Leone extreme eyeball close-ups, and then there's that scene with the communication of the eyeball close-ups. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. You know how absurd that is, and Anya Peroni is one of the great eyeball actors. She's great. I mean, she's got these piercing, beautiful eyes. She was great in. She did a lot of that in Tenebrae. She's the first victim in Tenebrae, and then she's doing a hell of a lot of that in Inferno. Her one scene in Inferno, where I believe she plays like the Mother of Tears, petting her cat. In that one scene, that incredibly effective. And she's got those Jennifer Connelly eyebrows, and though they look weird. They almost look painted on in this one. It's kind of odd. It looks much better in Tenebrae and Inferno. But I mean, so it's like, as I was saying, we get these plot strands, these breadcrumbs of plot, but they're just kind of going all out. I think a lot of people in the area have suggested that Anya Peroni's character, who's supposed to be a babysitter for Bob, that somehow that she was Paolo Malco's mistress, But and that's, you could think of that, but it's never really explained. there are a lot of things in the film. The connection that Paolo Malco has to the New England town and the house by the cemetery is never ever fully explained, and it's like, uh, it just kind of hangs out there in space, and you know, like what's going on? Like, what's with that dialogue? Where Paolo Malco tells Catriona MacColl to take the medicine that the baker prescribed her. What the hell? Italians. Catriona MacColl is great in this, as she is in all the other Fulci movies. I think this movie, to me, is like I think, unlike the other Fulci films of this time period, I think almost all the principal cast is a Fulci veteran. It's a Fulci 2 for 3 for. Catriona MacColl, who was in this film, City of the Living Dead, and The Beyond, of course. Paolo Malco, who was in this film, and then he played that intellectual guy in New York Ripper. Even Bob, who was in this film, and Manhattan Baby, and Dagmar Lassander, who was in this film, and The Black Cat. And then you have all those little guys, like that guy in the library who was in City of the Living Dead, and the guy that was in The Beyond, who was a little mousy guy who worked at the hotel under Catriona MacColl, and then even that library that looks like the library in The Beyond. It feels like this film, even though it's a unique film, it feels like it exists in the same world as City of the Living Dead and The Beyond. There's some kind of weird, like, it feels like a crossover in a sense. It's a very weird vibe. But once you start watching this film and The Beyond and City of the Living Dead over and over and over and over, there's this weird, strange familiarity to these locations and things happen, even though they're completely different locations. In the case of going from the Louisiana setting of The Beyond to this film with New England. But Walter Rizzati's score is beautiful. I don't think it quite reaches the heights of Fabio Frizzi's score for scores for Zombie or The Beyond. But there's some beautiful music. And especially at the ending, and that's the gore in this film by Maurizio Trani and the great Gianetto De Rossi of Zombie and so forth. Some good set pieces with the mechanical bat and all the blood everywhere, and the ending and the beginning with so the murders are well paced throughout, and I love when Freudstein drags the victims and the blood streaks across like a bloody mop, the hair is across. It's very visual and very, very gruesome, particularly. Beautiful film by Sergio Salvati. Again, as I said, I think Fulci is really unrecognized as one of the great visual stylists. And this is a film that really, as I said, it's kind of half monster movie, half ghost there's narrative, which Fulci was always interested in, of ghosts and different planes of existence. There's some Lovecraftian elements bubbling and ebbing and flowing throughout, but yeah, it's definitely, in that unique Fulci wheelhouse, and then the ending, which, I think is probably one of the more well-realized Fulci endings of that era, going from like City of the Living Dead, which is completely, what the hell is that? It's almost like they ran out of film, it's like, come on, give me a break. What kind of ending is that? That weird coda, ending with the kid running. The Beyond, which has a beautiful ending. But this film, the ending of this film, I don't think Bob dies at the end of the film. I think some people said that Bob dies, and then the young ghost girl kind of is able to transport. But I think Bob just kind of enters a different plane of existence. That the ghost girl saves Bob, and it's weird. And he comes through that crack in the mausoleum, in the tombstone. And he comes into this house, this world that is furnished the way it was 100 years ago. And then why do they walk down that country road and that beautiful shot panning across? It feels like 3D. Again, this is a beautifully photographed film with the house perfectly framed, and then that Henry James quote about, we don't know, who knows if children are monsters or monsters are children. Or maybe vice versa. I think that quote at the end of the film feels like a good way to see the film, because I think that the film is through the focal point of these children. I think that's a key to kind of understanding the film. As kind of a key is that these children are surrounded by violence and these violent episodes, and they're powerless to control them or understand them. And so that kind of empowerment at the very end of the film, where I think I've read some interviews with Fulci where he basically says the same thing, that Bob doesn't die, that he goes into this other plane of existence. And kind of goes into a kind of a beyond, very much like the characters at the very end of his film The Beyond as well. He kind of enters this other kind of plane of existence. Man, what else can I say about that? I mean, it's a loopy film. I mean, the plot, as I said, the more you watch it, the less sense it makes. I mean, who the hell would spend even one night in that house where things are going in and out? Is Anna the babysitter under the power of Freudstein? Why is Freudstein named Freudstein? Does it have anything to do with Sigmund Freud? Does it have the psychology of children and the id and the I don't think there's any kind of hidden meaning to that, or if understanding the significance. I don't think that has a big significance to the film, And I mean, in some ways, it feels like kind of like a Shining plot, like the idea that there was a guy, his mistress died, and then there's this new guy who is the predecessor, and he's going to this house and kind of repeating the same thing. He's going to die, and his mistress is going to die. And that almost felt like a kind of a plot fragment from The Shining. But it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. I don't think that guy was. I don't think Paolo Malco was in any way related. I don't think it was. I don't think Annia Proni was his mistress. But I don't know. Maybe wiser among us have thought this through. I don't know. I think your head could explode like a scanner if you tried to. If you tried to, try to use logic in Fulci's films sometime. I have to make a pilgrimage to that house. That's on my bucket list, to go to the house by the cemetery house. I visited the house where they shot The Beyond in Louisiana. It is still there. It's on a park now, and you can do tours of the house. And I have a video, actually. I took some video of that, and it's on the channel. If you do a search for the Beyond house, beautiful, beautiful house, man. And it looks. the outside of it looks like, and the back of it looks, because I made a mistake in that video. I said that the back wasn't seen in the film, but it actually was. But it looks, the front and the back look exactly the same. The house by the cemetery is not as cool, but it's in its own way is interesting, you know. And I think I've read some stuff that it's still out there. It still exists. I would love to. I'd love to see that someday. So, House by the Cemetery, one of my favorite films, a Euro cult gem. Don't buy into the haters, the people who want to make sport of these films, who don't recognize that these are really little treasures of Italian cinema, with some beautiful stuff, some beautiful filmmaking, and some really good stuff of value. If you love horror movies, and there's some really frightening sequences in this film. I think Fulci, the way he builds up suspense, and the way those moments in the cellar with those eyes, and then the idea that the monster is preceded by this moaning and groaning, and then the sound of children. You know, why is the child? Is the monster a child? Is he carrying around with him are those the moaning souls of the dead children? Is that him? You know, it's a lot of unanswered questions, but it makes for a very kind of spooky, scary experience. So there it is, House by the Cemetery. I think a great film, interesting stuff.